Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting of the Town of Sheffield Select Board to order for June 21st, 2021. This is our first Select Board meeting in person in, we think, over a year. And this is Bob's first ever regular Select Board in person, so welcome to the non-world of Zoom. Just want to make a few announcements. This meeting is being recorded, and you may record the meeting upon notifying the chair. Thank you, CTSB, for being here, and thank you for covering our meetings via radio or such or Zoom in the past year. If you wish to speak and are recognized by the chair, please come to the podium. The microphone is not so much for the board members as for CTSB audience so that they can hear what you have to say. Please state your name and address, and which you only need to state once. And any materials presented need to be left with the board. And if you can't hear, please just raise your hand or move closer. So with that, let's go ahead and start the formal agenda. Our first item is the approval of one set of minutes from June 3rd, 2021. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes of June 3rd, 2021.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Second, we're going to have a presentation by Deb Phillips, who will introduce herself a little bit more thoroughly when she comes to the podium. And she is going to be making a presentation on funds for food insecurity. And then after that, the board may have a discussion. So Deb, please, thank you for being with us this evening.
You are welcome. Thank you for having me. So I'm Deb Phillips, and I am here as the director of the Southern Berkshire Rural Health Network, which is a collaborative group that is funded by Fairview Hospital, and it's run by a collaboration of organizations. I'm also here on behalf of Berkshire Bounty, which is an organization that procures and distributes food throughout South and Central County to places in need and people in need. And I hope this will be more of a conversation than a presentation, but I'll start with what I am trying to look at. And that is that during COVID, there was an amazing coming together of people to address food insecurity. And thanks to Jenny Schwartz, who was working with me on food access, we were able to initially pull people together to make sure that the school districts all got food home to families whose children were no longer getting free and reduced price lunch. In the process, we learned a lot about families who needed more food than free and reduced price lunch even during the school year. And so we've gotten a better handle on what the food needs are in the communities. Now that we're out of crisis mode, we're not out of all of the fallout from the pandemic, but we're certainly out of crisis mode. What we're trying to do is figure out what we need to build, what we can learn from what's happened over the past 15 months, and what we can build to assure that not just families, but families and single adults and elders all have access to food that they need, ranging from help growing their own food to having prepared meals, depending on where they fall on the spectrum of need. And the hope was that we could build something that was South County wide, because that was the approach we took during the pandemic. And it was really nice to sort of bring everything in centrally and then spread it out to where it was needed, rather than this one having this much and maybe having too much and this one not having too little. And I know that the town administrators and or select boards have been getting together throughout the pandemic. So I know that the cooperation on a municipal level has been ongoing. So I'm not going to present something that feels too foreign or strange. But we were looking at sort of two legs on the food security. One was how we work together, and the other is as American Rescue Program funding comes into all of the towns. Food security is one of the things that it can be spent on. So it was to raise with you a question of what you see as needs in the town around food security, if you've thought about it, and if you haven't, to bring that to the forefront, and then to talk about how we can build a collaborative with the municipalities to look at how we manage food insecurity when there isn't a crisis, and then having the infrastructure in place so that if there is another crisis of some sort, we're prepared and we're not building things from scratch the way we did this time. I have to say that the collaboration, cooperation, the faith communities, the school districts, the councils on aging, the food pantries, it was phenomenal. But we learned a lot and want to really sustain it. So I guess before I go off to some of the ideas that we had, I wanted to really ask if you had thoughts on it, if you had thought about what you might need, what the town might do, or any of that.
Anyone had a chance to think much about this? I mean, I know we're all aware of it, and we all support our food pantry. We've all donated to various organizations in the Sheffield Centric that have supported seniors and schools. I know I want to compliment Deb. She has worked tireless on this, and I just had too many meetings to stay involved. I was involved to start with, and it was just way too much.
Exactly.
But I know I haven't really had a chance to put some specific thoughts, nor have I had a chance to talk with Marcia Broley and the others who head up our food pantry. So I need some more information. But let me ask if you have any thoughts.
Well, I have a question more than anything, and maybe Deb, you have some of that information. I mean, we don't have statistics, nor have we, has the town conducted a survey of all households to identify what proportion of our population, at least in Sheffield, suffers from chronic food insecurity. Mm-hmm. I don't know what those numbers are. Is it 600 people? Is it 800 residents? I don't know. I know of it in light of what Renee is saying in terms of our own household's involvement in trying to support the diminution of food insecurity. But statistically speaking, Sheffield, Great Barrington, New Marlborough, I don't know what the numbers are.
Well, the honest truth is we don't know either. We are working really hard to gather that information. Right now, the people we can ask are the people who are already coming in and getting services. Yeah. And then periodically, we identify people who are in need but have not asked for services. There's a lot of Yankee pride here. Exactly. It just is. Not a bad thing, but it does sometimes keep people from getting what they need. Yeah. So what we're doing now is, right now we've got a prepared meals program that will use restaurants as well as some food preparation that we're doing. And so we're just coming out with a campaign that will solicit donations so that the community can support it, but also begin to ask questions of what people need. And so we're trying to aggregate that kind of data and pull it all in one place. And we're asking for, house size, ages, and which town you live in. So we're trying to get it by town as well as by region. One of the things we know is that people move from town to town. Sure. Or they go to church in one town and live in another town and go to school in a third town, which is why we're trying to think regionally as opposed to town by town. But I do think it's important to look at the numbers, and they do shift. I mean, and they do as housing availability shifts. Great Barrington just got 45 affordable units. We're going to get an influx, and then things are going to get tight, and people are going to start moving out. And it's very fluid. So we're looking to get numbers for South County as a whole, as well as town by town as best we can. Okay. On another note, on a side note, Rural Health Network note, you'll see me again as I come to the towns and start talking about how we can collect data about all kinds of things.
You and I have talked.
We have had that one of those conversations. It was very distressing to me. But that there is no good South County data. There's occasionally town-by-town data, which, as I learned, is not accurate. And I think I'll share the conversation I had with Martin, which was I was trying to figure out people of color and income and need that way. And what I discovered, they had 2 years in which no people of color lived in Sheffield. It's like, I know that's wrong. And if that's wrong, what else is wrong? So, you know, for the schools, we have the number of families eligible for free and reduced price lunch, and not all families apply for it for a variety of reasons, but that's one of the ways we get a measure. But that's still, so we're really working. It's one of the most important things I think the Rural Health Network can do, is to gather data so that we really know what's happening here as compared to the rest of the county. We have a lot of county-wide data. Yeah. But we know that Pittsfield is different from North Adams, is different from Sheffield. And it's not data we can rely on to make decisions about what we need for our communities.
Let me just ask Bob if Bob had any comments at this point.
Yeah, I was wondering, is this based going forward as a normal food insecurity, or are you trying to get a feel or a base for if we were to have another pandemic, because the normal channels changed so drastically that everybody was trying to adapt?
No, we're trying to get a baseline at this point, but if we can establish the right systems, they should be able to respond by expanding as opposed to having to create them anew, which is what we did this time. And Berkshire Bounty went into gear and collected food from a variety of places. The People's Pantry in Great Barrington and the Sheffield Food Pantry have begun working together to share resources. We have the Monterey Food Pantry and the Otis Food Pantry in the group also. And using the resources through Berkshire Grown and Berkshire Bounty and the People's Pantry to move food out to the communities where it's needed. And that's really the goal, is to be able to, you know, when Otis says we don't have access to any high quality protein foods for our families, you know, we can give them canned goods and it's great. We can say, oh, there's somebody who can get that for you. And so the idea is that just because you live in Sheffield or New Marlborough instead of Monterey doesn't mean you don't have access to the same quality of food, regardless of your ability to purchase it.
Well, one of the things, I'm sorry, Bob, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I know one of the things that when I first got this note from Rhonda, it was, you know, how do you identify food insecurity, which I think you've talked about, and how do we reach those who may not come forward and self-identify? You know, where does the Western Food Bank, which not all of the food pantries are members of, unless something has changed in Sheffield. Yeah. And you know, what's the proposed structure of this? So I think my question would be, how possibly can our town help you establish this basic overall structure that's kind of needed while you continue to move food out, but without knowing where it should be? It kind of continues to be a conundrum.
Yeah. So the things, you know, the way we've been identifying food insecurity has to do, it's through the schools, it's through the councils on aging, it's through, we're building it up through doctors' offices. One of the things that we learned was that there are no food security questions asked when patients come into the doctor's office. So we're going to incorporate that. That is I always use simple, not easy. It's a simple place to do it. So those are the things we're looking at, and then the question is, and I know that we get an annual town census kind of thing, and the question is, for any of the towns or all of the towns, is there anything way we can tweak that to gather a little more information? Because that would be because obviously not everybody fills it out, but most people do, I think. And so is there information we could begin asking on that would get fed into a central area, de-identified? We don't need the names, we don't need the streets they're living on, but if people identify as having a need, that would give us numbers. It would also give us the ability to offer them something. You know, the other project that we're working on is a resource list that everyone can have. So if somebody walks in to pay their taxes and says whatever, because sometimes they do, you know, they walk in for one thing and then something else comes out. There's at least something you can say, here are some resources that might help you.
Well, we have resources available also just as a natural course at the senior center, the police center. We have racks downstairs.
Right.
The library.
Great.
You know, I don't know if our town clerk, Phyllis C. Joyce, could legally include a question on that. Probably.
That's what
probably not, but it might be that something could be inserted with that. That's, you know, all run by the state, and I know Rhonda would be the biggest help on this, but you know, the town also does a number of different mailings that something, if we just have a advanced enough idea, and a simple questionnaire, simple questionnaire, possibly could go into a mailing and wouldn't charge us any, wouldn't cost us any more postage.
Great.
So, you know,
that's a great idea.
Phyllis is the one to work with on the town census, and that may all be controlled as to what can go into that envelope.
Right. Yes, you're the first select board that I've met with, so you know, I don't have to ask that question the next one because I've gotten the answer to how we have, the direction we can take in pursuing that. But yeah, so we were really trying to figure out how to, certainly if there was a way we could work through the towns to simply gather more information.
Right.
That would be a big help. The other things that we were thinking of, particularly in terms of the rescue funding, is one of the things that we've discovered in all of the towns is a lack of storage. And I know that even at the food pantry here, and the question was whether, and if towns had storage capacity, it could be used for a variety of things, but in a time of crisis, it means that food could come in and sit here for a few days, rather than what has happened in the past year, which is, well, we're handing out food Saturday, so it needs to come here no later, you know, no earlier than Friday afternoon, because there just isn't cold storage. There isn't even shelf storage in some places. So one of the things that we were asking towns to consider is whether creating some kind of storage that could be used if there's a town celebration. You know, it wouldn't just be for food security, but it would be something that would be there and available so that the town could actually store food for, not forever, but for a period of time in a time of crisis and be able to distribute it as needed.
That's an issue that's come up, of course, with the Southern Berkshire Regional Emergency Management.
Absolutely comes up.
Storage, and it's not just the storage, it's also the security, because that becomes a target, a potential target for a variety of forces that are not serving the interests of our towns. So I know, and I think it would be appropriate to bring it back to them again, to collectively in this part of South County think about how we establish one or more depots, if you will, that could do this, and that could include paying for, you know, refrigeration units and freezer units and shelving and everything else. But it's also the issues for emergencies of cots, water supply, blankets, first aid kits. It's a big pot that we can put all of this into potentially.
And it's something that would be great to look at regionally, like where are the places they need to be, so that everyone can access them.
I don't think we have room in any town structure. I just don't think we do.
I think it'd have to be special purpose.
You know, but I do know that Southern Berkshire Regional School District is the largest shelter outside of Simon's Rock. And I also know they have kitchens over there, and a lot of the people who do, I would imagine, receive food are children, including during this last period of time, food for the weekends.
Yes.
So I would really put them on my target, my radar, because I know unless we remodel upstairs, we have no space. There's no space at the police station, there's no space at the library that I'm aware of, there's no space at the senior center. They're just,
So we could certainly bring them in, but
Yeah,
it's also
at the
something to
school,
look at that funding
yeah.
for.
It is.
Yeah, the school, I'm not sure is as occupied as it would like to be, and that might be something that the school committee, that serves all 5 of the towns,
Yeah.
this is our food pantry. So I think that, to me, is the best spot to go looking for capacity of some sort or another, or just even space to build in.
Excellent. The other thoughts, the other things that came up were new pantry facilities, because I know that your pantry has limited space. These are just things that I'm tossing out. I don't expect any decisions, and I think ultimately we probably will hope to bring a larger group of people together, someone from each town, maybe someone from each school district into a room as this happens. But we wanted to have the initial conversations and just sort of get the thinking. The other thing that we were thinking about was gardening assets, farming assets might serve the needs. Community gardens, the front yard gardens that Green Acres does. To start thinking about what you know about that need. And again, if you don't know enough, think, what are the questions we need to be asking? So, where you know, that's great. And where you don't know, let's run those questions together. Because my guess is if you don't know, none of the towns know.
Yeah. Have you reached out to Berkshire Grown?
Oh yeah, Berkshire Grown is part of the group that we work with.
Okay.
Yeah, no, they're very much part. They're part of it, Green Acres. So we have it's called the Southern Berkshire Food Collaborative Working Group.
Ah.
And it's Berkshire Grown and Berkshire Bounty and the Rural Health Network and the 2 school districts, the Sheffield Food Assistance, People's Pantry, the Otis Food Pantry, the Monterey Food Pantry, Multicultural Bridge, the Family Resource Center, the Gene Chapin, who's I think the Congregational Church here. Anyway, it's a very collaborative group that we all meet once every week or 2. And so this was sort of how do we reach out and begin to make sure everyone's included, so we're getting the information we need and we're going back and saying, what role do you want to play in this? Because keeping people fed is something that it's going to take all of us.
Yeah.
Deb, I'm going to suggest Jean Chapin is the secretary, church secretary of the Congregational Church,
Yes.
but also Christ Trinity.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, Pastor Eric Karras has been very involved in this. I'm just wondering about their downstairs undercroft. I don't know, I would talk to Pastor Eric about that use. And also Thrivent and the Lutherans are extremely good at getting grants.
Yes.
They're very, very good, and the Lutheran Church supports an incredible number of grants. So I check in with Pastor Eric.
Okay, yeah, he has been part of
that
group.
area of the undercroft is quite large, with a kitchen adjacent to it, and I just don't know. Probably be mad at me, but I just don't know how that space is currently being used.
Yeah, we also were involved with Jill Graham in putting in a proposal last year to create a kitchen and storage, but didn't
But their
fund it.
space is very limited.
Yeah, well, they were going to build it out. That was the idea. They applied for a USDA grant last fall, but we didn't get it. So anyway, so that was the other place. So we were thinking about storage. We were thinking about what are the farming and gardening needs, and then really making sure that we're all working together to get for equitable distribution of whatever we do accumulate among the I think it's 13 South Berkshire towns. So
I think this has been a very good conversation. Obviously, lots more needs to be detailed. We need to get the statistics that will help us understand what the need is. I know from working with the food pantry in the past, need fluctuates.
Yeah.
It's seasonal, but
It sounds like you've done a very good job at collaborating and trying to get everybody on the same page and be resilient. That's commendable.
Thank you. Thank you. That is my goal, is really, you know, I work half-time and I mostly have time to convene groups and get people talking to each other, getting ideas going and moving forward. So thank you for your time.
Well, I think I'd like to invite you back.
Okay.
Maybe we're June, maybe October, if you feel that you need to come back earlier. But I would be very interested in finding out what you found out.
Okay.
Both from the level of the feedback from other municipalities, as well as what your work is doing in terms of trying to get your arms around this amorphous data.
Yes.
Does that sound reasonable to the board?
Yes,
It does.
I would be
Okay.
happy to do that. You may hear from me sooner, depending on the governor's directions about the rescue plan money is, if we sort of come up with something that we need to
Yeah.
talk about sooner. But
It's going to be interesting to see, because I know the legislature is trying to get involved in managing some of that money.
Yeah.
But he's made the first chunk, almost half of it, I think, available to communities in need, which we do not qualify in that. We haven't had the substantial impact that some communities have. But it will be interesting to see what he does with some of that funding, with or without the legislature. And of course, we have our own funding. But so we will look forward to that, Deb. And thank you for all the work you and your partners have done on this. Very much appreciated.
You're welcome.
Very good presentation.
thank you.
thank you.
Thank you for your time.
All righty, thank you. Our next item is the review of our town minister's appraisal. Was there any more discussion on this issue of food insecurity, or did we cover it enough at this moment? We're good?
I think we're good, yeah.
We're
I think we're good.
Okay, good. So we have up next a review of our town administrator's appraisal. We did this, I think it was last week, Rhonda?
Yes.
And Rhonda did a self-appraisal for us, and then each of us did independently our own appraisals. And these will go into her personnel file. And while some boards kind of do a composite appraisal and come up with kind of one appraisal, what we, the three of us, decided would be better is for each of us to kind of give certain highlights of how we view Rhonda's work product and how she interacts with us and the job that she does for all of our town. So we're going to do that now. And is there anyone who wants to start?
Would you like to start, Renee?
Sure. Well, I keep trying to remember how long Rhonda and I have worked together, but Rhonda's been here about 10 years.
In this position.
In this position, yes. Before that, she was the assistant town administrator, and I've had a chance to work with Rhonda for a long time, and it's been a very enjoyable experience, and it's very dependent on the makeup of the board, because unlike Great Barrington, we do not have a town manager. We have a town administrator, and the two positions are quite different. On the town administrator position, and a lot of the responsibilities rest with the select board, and that's always important to remember. My overall rating for Rhonda, this is, and I'll just go very quickly through the various categories, is 4.6 out of a possible of 5, which is rated as excellent. The first category is general management, and I gave Rhonda a 4.6. I've always found Rhonda to be very organized, very easy to work with, very open to having select board members work on projects with her. We just have to make sure that we just don't get so enthusiastic that we become overwhelming, and I'm speaking to myself on that. The challenges of last year with COVID, with lacking a highway superintendent for quite some time, lacking someone as the interdepartmental clerk, which services the 3 boards, plus a number of other things. This all meant that this fell to Rhonda, and then some of it fell to her assistant, and Jill Hughes, and I didn't see too many things get dropped. It was just Rhonda just does it. On the second category, which is personnel, I gave Rhonda a 4.0. I've met very few people in my life that like to deal with personnel issues. It's a constant issue that needs to be dealt with, whether it's positive or needs reinforcing, or in some cases needs severe attention. And Rhonda and I have discussed that she continues to work in that area and continues to improve, but we talk a lot about personnel issues. But I know that Rhonda is very fair, and if anything, she prefers to work longer with people than I normally would. But I think the Select Board and Rhonda have worked very well in that area. On communications, which is another area, I gave Rhonda a 4.4. I think the communication requirements with the shutdown town hall, and with COVID, and with Zoom meetings, and before that with telephone meetings, I think it's been a very difficult year. We've depended more on email blasts and other things, but again, I've heard no complaints, and I appreciate the work that Rhonda has done to try and keep us, as well as committees, commissions, and board and the town informed. On finance, I gave Rhonda a 4.7. Rhonda pulls together a very good budget every year. There's very few changes that the finance committee makes, because the budget she proposes is solid. She's very good at finding money. She has gotten us a lot of grants, the big ones, the Mass DOT bridge, and just massive $1 million plus grants. She's very attentive to how we can stretch dollars one way or another to deal with infrastructure. There's never enough money. Projects planning and development, I gave Rhonda a 4.6. I think she's very thorough. Sometimes things get just in the day-to-day with so much to do. Also communicating on a very regular basis, taking phone calls. Sometimes things can get just a little bit there, but they always come back, and Rhonda's very open on things, suggestions from the board. We have also added this year all of the CARES, the COVA, the FEMA, and now we're going to add in a few minutes another pile of money from the American Rescue Plan Act, which Deb referenced. And professional development, it was a hard year this year, but Rhonda is always working with our staff as well as us to increase professional development, including her own. So those are my comments. I look forward to working again with Rhonda this year. She has given us some goals, and we're going to she's given us and herself some goals, and we have some plans, and we hope that this is going to be a very positive year. So that's my appraisal, and again, thank you for being such a good town administrator, Rhonda. It's always been a pleasure to work with you, and it's really a pleasure to work with this board with you.
Thank you.
Next.
Well, I might as well go next. I won't be quite as long, but Rhonda has done a good job. Overall, I'm not going to break it down. It was a 4.1 is what I gave Rhonda. There are a few areas where we can improve, but overall she's done a great job. And it's not easy dealing with so many different personalities on the board and so many different functions and having so many different things that come to her desk on a daily basis. So she's done a good job. I enjoy working with her, and I'm happy to continue.
Thank you, Bob. I'm going to echo those comments as well. I think administratively, fiscally, and then from a communications perspective, Rhonda is excellent and works very well with us in our own independent ways. keeps us together and keeps us on track with regard to the town's priorities. And it's been a real pleasure for me over the past 2 years to also to get to know Rhonda and to work with her and with this particular select board. One of the areas that I had mentioned in my review is that I would like to have Rhonda communicate more with our select board about both her history with the town and her vision of what, even though the town manager position is different from a town administrator position, I think Rhonda has so much wisdom and has so much experience that is sometimes difficult to share with us on a day-to-day basis. But to think about our capital budgeting, to think about the vision for the community, there are very few people that have Rhonda's experience to be able to help us with this, and that's one area that I'd like to see improve, and I'm going to work hard to try to make that happen with you as much as possible. So my thanks to you, Rhonda.
Thank you.
And I do always talk more than I should, but I wanted people to know that this isn't just a 3 or 4 line appraisal.
No.
There are very specific areas that we evaluate, and most of us had a pretty long appraisal where we went into some of the specifics that have been discussed today. We take this very seriously, as does Rhonda, and so we're looking forward to it. Go ahead.
The only thing I was going to add, so Rhonda does the appraisal of herself that way, and then we do the appraisal of Rhonda, and then we talk through all the issues, and it's a very effective process, and I think it's a well-managed process.
And I think it's a difficult process. Trying
It's always difficult.
do an evaluation like that is, with somebody that you're working with all the time, it is a little bit trying.
It's another personnel issue.
Exactly.
Okay, so excellent, thank you all. While she will appear at a future select board meeting, I would like to ask Rhonda to make us all aware of the transition that's taken place in the town collector treasurer's office.
So the board has decided to offer the position, and she accepted, to Monique Belair, who's been with us just about 3 years, as the assistant to the collector and treasurer. She seems very excited. She's done a great job so far. It's been 2 weeks on her own. I keep going down saying, do you need anything? No, she's good. You know? So we're offering senior work-off assistance, which she'll probably need when taxes are due. We currently have an ad out for an assistant for Monique. We do have some resumes and applications, which she'll go through. You know, Jill and I kind of edit some of them, but we'll show Monique all of them and work with her to find the right person to make the office continue on the path that it always has been on since Alicia and Monique have worked in there.
Yes, and Alicia Doolin is the now treasurer collector in Great Barrington. And from what I read already in the paper, her skills are being put to use, skills that she honed here. And Monique has been her right-hand person and brought a lot of the suggestions and improvements. This was advertised in the paper. We did interview candidates, and it was just the unanimous opinion of the board by far that Monique was the person to choose for this position, and we're looking forward to her being extremely successful, and she will be introduced in person at a future meeting, and then of course I know people will have a chance to meet her if they had not already met her once Town Hall opens up.
Correct.
So we've been very fortunate in that. So our next item, we called for people to express their interest in being appointed to a wide range of town positions that depend on volunteer help. Everyone who is currently in these positions was also sent a letter by our town administrator asking them if they would like to have their name in the pool of applicants for consideration. So we read those applicants' names at our last meeting, and tonight I'm hoping that the board will go ahead and appoint a number of positions for fiscal year 22, which starts July 1. So who wants to read this? Martin, you've done a pretty good job at the meetings.
I'm happy to do so again. I'm up for it completely.
Okay.
And we're happy to let you.
Okay.
I know you are.
All right.
Thank
And
you.
then what we'll do, where there are more candidates than positions, let's just set that aside if we can, and take a vote on the rest of the positions, if that's all right with the board, and then we'll come back to that one on the Board of Health where there's too many applicants for the one position. Very good, we'll see if we can encourage the person who is not appointed to apply for another position.
Okay, so bear with me here then as I go through the list. I wasn't sure we were going to do it that way. So
how would you like to do it?
That's fine with me, actually. Let's go ahead and do it that way.
All right.
So, but I'm going to hesitate a couple of times as I go through if there are more than.
There's only
It should
There's
just
only-
be
just the Board of
highlighted one, Martin.
It didn't highlight.
Here. Thanks,
That's the one I think. Okay, I've got it.
Sure.
Yeah, I've got it. Okay. So for the Agricultural Commission, we have four vacancies for a 3-year term. The applicant is Bob Kilmer. For Animal Control Officer, we have 1 vacancy. The applicant is Cassie Keeley, who is the existing Animal Control Officer, as well as our Animal Inspector. For the Ashley Falls Historic District Commission alternate, there were 2 vacancies. The applicant is Catherine Miller. For our Berkshire Regional Planning Committee delegate alternate, we have 1 vacancy and 1 applicant, Renee Wood. For the position of Principal Assessor, 1 vacancy, 1 applicant, Tammy Blackwell. For the Board of Registrars, we have 1 vacancy and 1 applicant, Holly Aragi. For Building Inspector, we have 1 vacancy and 1 applicant, Paul Green. For the Conservation Commission, we have 3 vacancies, 1 applicant, Ted Pittman, who is the existing chair of the Conservation Commission. For Constable, we have 2 vacancies and 2 applicants. The applicants are Bruce Person and Jim McGarry. For the Council on Aging, we have 3 vacancies. We have 1 applicant, Eileen Clark, who is an existing member of the Council on Aging. For the Cultural Council, we have 4 vacancies and 2 applicants. The applicants are Jillian Hettinger and Hester Velmans. For the Electrical Wiring Inspector, we have 1 vacancy and 1 applicant, Michael Lining, existing wiring inspector. We have an Assistant Electrical Wiring Inspector, 1 vacancy, 1 applicant, Butch Ray, who's also in that position. For the Gas and Piping Inspector, we have 1 vacancy and 1 applicant, Robert Krupski. For the Gas and Piping Inspectional Assistant or Inspector Assistant, we have 1 vacancy, 1 applicant, Bob Gennari. On the Historical Commission, we have 4 vacancies and 2 applicants, Dennis Sears and Priscilla Cote. On the Housing Commission, we have 2 vacancies, 1 applicant, Kathy Orlando. For the Parking Clerk, we have 1 vacancy, 1 applicant, Phyllis E. Joyce. For the Planning Board alternate member, we have 1 vacancy, 1 applicant, Pat Levine. For Plumbing Inspector, again, 1 vacancy, 1 applicant, Bob Krupski. And the Assistant Plumbing Inspector, 1 vacancy, 1 applicant, Bob Gennari. For the Police Officer full-time position, we have 2 vacancies and 2 applicants, Jake Gonska and Michael Norse, both current full-time police officers. For the Police Officer Reserve Intermittent, we have 3 vacancies, 1 applicant, Jen Brown. For the Recycling Coordinator, we have 1 vacancy, 1 applicant, Renee Wood. For the Sanitation Inspector, 1 vacancy, 1 applicant, Scott Smith. For Town Clerk, we have 1 vacancy, 1 applicant, Phyllis E. Joyce. For Town Council, we have 1 vacancy, 1 applicant, KP Law. For the Veterans Agent, we have 1 vacancy, 1 applicant, Lori Hills. For the Zoning Board of Appeals alternate, we have 2 vacancies, 1 applicant, Catherine Miller.
And that's it.
That's it?
Because the next one is the appointments to the
All right,
boards.
very good.
Okay. So, thank you, Martin, for reading this list and all of the people. with the exception of the Board of Health, which hasn't been read yet, what is the board's pleasure?
Motion to approve all the applicants as read.
Second.
Okay. Rhonda, do we need to say anything about police officers subject to the Police Reform Act and how that plays out? Okay, great. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, that's done. Thank you. You want to talk about the Board of Health?
Yes. So we have one vacancy and 2 applicants. I am on the Board of Health. I'm the current chair of the Board of Health. I certainly have expressed a preference in the past. I don't know how that's going to be taken into account. Our last Board of Health meeting had to be canceled because there were only 2 participants and we didn't have a quorum. So there was not discussion about either of the 2 candidates, but I'm happy to discuss that here with the Select Board if you're so inclined.
Okay, so could we have you read their names?
Yes, there's 1 vacancy, there are 2 applicants. The first is Scott Smith and the second is Lauren Hyde.
All right, so we're going to have to say yes to one and no to another and encourage them to apply for another position where there are still plenty of vacancies available. Bob, let me start the discussion with you and then we'll move to Martin.
Okay. Well, it would be a question for Martin. Do either one presently sit on the Board of Health? Are these re-apps or?
No, Scott Smith is our Title V inspector who has done a tremendous amount over the past 2 years to educate new members of the Board of Health. He has precisely the experience that the Board of Health could use with regard to Title V issues, and it would be my inclination to vote for Scott Smith.
I will let you know that when I was on the Board of Health, I can't remember for how many years, Scott was a member of the Board of Health, and I found him to be extremely knowledgeable, willing to work, all right, and you know, Scott is a person who has his own opinions, and he's very good about sharing them in a respectful way, but I found him to be an absolutely excellent Board of Health member. Could not have asked for anyone to do a better job.
That's the only question I have.
Lauren, we know through her work with the citizens petition, I think she is anxious to give back to her community. But if she is not chosen, I am sure that there is another position that would be very appropriate for her if she would like to put her name in.
And I hope she would, because it is nice to have interested parties.
So is there a motion on this?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we appoint Scott Smith to the position.
And I will second that. Any further discussion? Roll call vote, excuse me. We can just do all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, so, why don't I take it upon myself, if it's all right with the board, to call Lauren and encourage her to apply for another position. Now, let's go on to our second list, which is appointment announcements for fiscal year 22. Unfortunately, these will be made after the start of the new fiscal year, but we do have several people who have put their names in, and I really want to encourage anyone who says, I'd like to give back to my town, and also voted at our town meeting that you do not want select board members filling in some of these positions. Put your name in. It just takes a simple email to Rhonda or a letter. It doesn't have to be a lengthy resume. Just indicate your interest. And Rhonda, all the open positions are on the town's website?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm really asking people to get involved. I think there's some tough commissions and boards, but most of them are a lot of fun, and even those that are tough are fun, most of the time. Okay, so Martin, let's have you read this list.
Sure. So for the Ashley Falls Historical Commission, we have 2 vacancies for 3-year terms. We have 1 applicant at this stage, Philip Gee.
Excuse me, we have 2.
Sally McKenzie. Yeah.
Okay.
Her.
Oh, that's right, sorry.
She came in after this was printed up.
So we have 2 applicants for the Ashley Falls Historic Commission, Philip Gee and Sally McKenzie. For the Board of Assessors, we have 1 vacancy for a 3-year term. The applicant so far is David A. Smith Jr. For the Cemetery Commission, we have 1 vacancy for 3 years. We have 1 applicant so far, Jim Miller. For the Conservation Commission, we have 2 vacancies for 3-year terms. The current applicant is Renee Wood, and that would be a temporary appointment for no more than 1 year or until someone else comes forward. On the Cultural Council, we have 2 vacancies, each for 3-year terms. We have 2 applicants, Bonnie Silvers and Todd McKenzie. For Fire Chief, we have 1 vacancy for 1 year and 1 applicant, Dave Ulrich, who's the current chief. On the Historical Commission, we have 2 vacancies for 3-year terms. We have 1 applicant, Bonnie Silvers. And for Police Officer Reserve Intermittent, we have 2 vacancies, both for 3-year terms, and we have 2 applicants, Tricia Zucco and Michael Ovid. Again,
All right, so these will be made at the next meeting. Rhonda is, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So can I suggest that the board suspend their appointment policy for the fire chief and the 2 reserve police officers, because it will be after July 1st, and we don't want to run into any issues with any of them not being officially appointed.
Okay, we have a motion to that effect.
So moved.
Second.
All right, any further discussion? Well, sorry. It'll take a while. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, that passes. Rhonda is also going to send, because there's the Ashley Falls Historic District Commission Chair sent us the requirements for membership for that commission, and all these names will go to him to make sure that we don't appoint someone who is then going to not fit in to the criteria that's spelled out in the general bylaw. So we'll have that taken care of by the next meeting. All right, thank you. Now, we do have a resignation from the fire department. Rhonda, would you handle this for us, please?
Sure. Malcolm McCain, who's been with the fire department for several years, has submitted his resignation on May 31st of this year.
Motion to accept.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, do we wish to send Malcolm a letter for thanks for his service?
Yes, I think that would be appropriate.
All right, it's always good to thank people for their service. I try not to burn bridges myself, so let's go ahead and do that. All right, now the next item we have is a resignation from the administrative assistant of the fire department. Rhonda, please.
So this is administrative assistant to the police department, Vonda Amstead. She has worked with the police department for several years, doing some of the clerical, the LTCs, license to carries, the firearms identification. She's worked on alarms. She's handled the detail billing and payment. And so she has accepted another job that no longer leaves her time to handle this for us. So we'll have an ad out for that position as well.
Motion to accept Vonda Amsted's letter of resignation.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Letter of appreciation?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. I know you will miss her tremendously. Our next item is action regarding application for firefighter. Rhonda, please.
So we have an application that was submitted from the fire department from Michelle Dawson Harvey, who is looking to serve, I believe, on emergency calls.
First responder.
First responder. It looks like she has quite a bit of experience in that field, and I don't have anything official from the chief. Oh, I do.
Yeah, I think there was
Okay,
a...
sorry, it's on the bottom here. I knew that I had talked to him and that he was in favor of Michelle, but we do have the official letter for Michelle from Dave.
Has she undergone the Corey check? I'm sure she's been Coreyed as a nurse.
Yes.
You know, her
As an
background,
MT.
Yes.
her background is extremely impressive.
It is.
We will be very lucky to add her to the fire department as a first responder.
Motion to appoint Michelle Harvey as a probationary firefighter for the Sheffield Fire Department.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
We now have 2 women. There's room for more.
You don't have a gender bias, do you?
No. To be honest, if I was younger, I would look forward to being a firefighter. That was something I always thought, I just was born at the wrong time. So our next item is a review of town hall.
Oh, sorry, we have one more. We have Kristen Wolf.
We did.
Did we actually?
We
We've
were just
already
waiting
appointed
for
her.
that.
Okay.
She's already over there working.
Right, well, I knew that. I just wanted to make sure. I had talked with Rhonda briefly as to
Yeah.
whether or not we had taken a formal motion.
Yes, yes,
Short of the chief's recommendation.
yes,
So,
yes, we did. I think we had the chief's and the board's informal, non-written recommendation when we
Yes, we
took
did.
that action. All right, so the next item is a review of town hall opening and just a meeting update. I'm going to ask Rhonda to take care of that, and then we'll open it, for board discussion.
Did you want to do number 10, just a review of the warrant officer for the fire department?
I'm sorry. Yes, we do. Let's do the approval, discussion and approval of a warrant approval officer for the fire department. Martin, how about you handling this?
Sure. So, as we've discussed in prior meetings, there are a number of employees of Pittsfield Communication Systems, Inc. that are members of our fire department, all of whom are in the process or have already submitted their disclosure letters to Town Hall with regard to the appearance of a conflict of interest or potentially an actual conflict of interest. As part of that process, as with each department in town, the department head submits on a bi-weekly basis a warrant for the approval of invoices that are incurred by those departments. Chief Ulrich is also an employee of Pittsfield Communications Systems. He is also the chief. I have been working with him as his administrative assistant in submitting the warrants for the last couple of years, the last 2 years. But he now has agreed and recommended to us that when a warrant for the payment of town-related expenses were to include a Pittsfield Communication Systems invoice, that he would not sign off on that invoice, that some other officer appointed by the town, some other fire department officer would sign that particular invoice as an approval for the purposes of approving the invoice for payment, in which case the chief would recuse himself effectively for that particular invoice. All the other invoices that had nothing to do with Pittsfield Communications would be approved by the chief as it normally is. So we discussed this with the board, and we agree that we had previously agreed in principle that for any warrants containing Pittsfield Communication invoices, that any member that is employed by Pittsfield Communication or otherwise a controlling interest in Pittsfield Communication would not be signing off on that particular invoice. And any other warrant, any other officer, that being 2 of the captains and at least 1 of the lieutenants, could sign off on that. So I thought we already had made a decision, but I don't.
You did at a working meeting. So
Okay.
it's-
So this is
would be
more
your
to
recommendation.
inform the town of the actions that were taken at a previous working meeting, and that was approved by the full board. All right, so now let's go to review of town hall opening and meeting update. Rhonda?
So we're going to open July 1st. We'll open up our doors in probably about a year, almost a year and a half.
Yeah.
So it's going to be very different for all of us who've worked behind closed doors for a long time. We do have modifications to the town hall that have been made. where staff and patrons that come in, citizens, will be protected. Clearly, if you're uncomfortable, you can wear a mask. Nothing will be said or indicated or even asked why you have a mask on. That's a personal choice, and we want everyone to feel comfortable. So there will be some masks provided, a box if anyone needs one. There'll be some hand sanitizer. We have the automatic dispensers that will be filled and ready for use on the 1st. And so we're looking forward to seeing everyone back in the building.
And you can also still use the mailbox that's outside the door. I think a lot of people have gotten into that. It's very quick, very efficient. It will be continuing to be checked several times a day. You can also use the phone. You know, again, it's a personal decision, but I would like to add, if you are not vaccinated for whatever reason, it would be great if you would wear a mask to protect those who are in town hall and others who might come in. But again, that is a personal decision.
And we'll clearly continue to put things outside or work with people who are not comfortable coming in the building. We can meet them outside. We can hang things on the door. We can set things outside. We just want it to work for everyone.
Yeah, we set in place a number of workarounds that seem to have worked very well. That's good. The senior center, I think, is on a full schedule. They've got a lot going on over there.
They do.
The transfer station's open. I think the library is moving to be open, if not already.
Correct. It's open.
So,
pretty much back to its normal schedule.
So, you know, we just want to make sure that we all will be able to enjoy this for more than just a couple of weeks. So we all need to continue the good habits that have made Sheffield very much, in many ways, it's almost like the pandemic didn't hit us in terms of the disease and the death. The town has been very, I was going to say religious, but the town has been very good about taking care of itself and its neighbors.
Discipline.
So, disciplined. Yes, yes. So I thank everyone for that. All right, meeting update.
So as you can see, we're here for our very first in-person meeting, and all the boards and commissions have been notified that in-person meetings are to take place now. The board voted not to allow virtual meetings at this point, but they can meet in the senior center, the town hall, the library. There's plenty of spaces to schedule a meeting.
Mm-hmm. We just need to have that go through Rhonda's office for calendaring.
Correct.
Because sometimes there's more meetings than there are places. Okay. So, our next item, I'm sorry, go ahead.
This might be the appropriate time to reconsider the ability to hold in-person and virtual meetings. It's as the governor's orders have been modified, and they are allowing it. I've had personally a lot of input from citizens indicating that that's one of the reasons why they started participating in some of the in various meetings, whether it be the select board, the CONCOM, the Board of Health, not so much, the library trustees. It's an option that, in my opinion, offering our citizens opens the door for greater participation.
So how do we potentially address that without over-stressing? In most cases, there's a board secretary who's trying to take minutes and, you know, kind of keeping the board on track. So how do we address that and add on another task that somebody is going to have to monitor the Zoom participation, etc. So I'm going to ask you to think about that.
I have thought about it.
I'm going to ask.
Would you like to talk about it?
No, because, I'll talk about anything, but I'd like you to talk to the people involved who would actually have to do it, okay? And then maybe come back at our next meeting. Is that fair?
That's fair. I mean, we've talked about it at the select board level, so. I'm reluctant to add on other tasks that are going to diminish the capability of that person to do the job they already have. So I'm just going to put that out there.
you know, and Bob, what are your comments on this?
For me, it's more of a technology issue. I don't believe we have a good technology system in place for a hybrid model. And I'm a little reluctant to spend the money to do that if this is going to sunset in April, I think is what the governor is proposed. I mean, if it was going to be a forever kind of thing, and if we looked into the technologies that would be necessary, it does create more participation, which is great.
Which is great, yes.
But it also is going to have some technology challenges for us. And I would like to know that we aren't spending money for a short period of time and then have technology we won't be using.
So Martin has 2 areas of investigation. Okay, George?
Yes.
Would you please go to the microphone? Name and address, please.
George O'Lane, Foley Road. I'm also on the planning board, and we've looked at it because a lot of people want to participate in the planning board, but they can't always get here. And if you had the Zoom capabilities, okay, not push it as the way to do it, but have a good system so people can actually do it, then I think it'd be an advantage to the town and everybody else, you know, because some of the older people, they don't want to drive at night, you know, but they want to participate.
Right.
And they may have a grandchild that can help them set it up on their TV. You know, I mean, I've been invited to a lot of Zoom meetings with the department, the American Legion Department, and I don't go to them because it don't work at my house. You know, my computer's not set up for it.
So I think, just a minute, Todd, I think we're all kind of the same thing. It's like, how do we do it? And is it possible? And what are the implications? So Todd, so I think we're all kind of on the same page.
Thank you, Renee. Todd McKenzie, Ranapo Road. I'm jumping the gun a little bit, but one of the commissions that I've been helping the last couple of weeks is the Commission on Disabilities. So for another data point, accessibility for people that physically can't get here for one reason or another, kind of builds on your point, George, right? Your demographic might be older. Notwithstanding, there may be some challenges, but in this day and age, and hopefully, Bob, not at an arm and a leg, not even an arm, a solution for it. So I was always trained that when you had an idea, you had to come with a solution for it, right? So I think your challenge is right, that, hey, we're all inclined to do this. Let's figure out the how and make sure that the offsets aren't too great. But as I said, on behalf of the commission and as a citizen, I would tell you accessibility is really key.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining the commission. Sarah? And then I think everybody will have special.
Sari Hoy, 60 Main Street, Sheffield. I agree with everything Todd and George said. But I also agree, I would like to see this continue longer than, are they saying that they will only allow it until April right now? Is that what they're saying?
I believe it's April.
I mean, I know for myself, I like to come to the select board meetings. I really like to go to the Conservation Commission meetings also. And I can do that much more often and stay on longer than if I had to be here in person. So personally, it's been fantastic that we could do Zoom. I don't know if as a town we can write to the governor and say this is, this is how we feel about this. I will be calling, I will be writing and saying that's how I feel about this, and to encourage him to move this forward. I think that part of the challenge is the security issues with Zoom. And I do think that we need a tech person. And I think a tech person, I think a person who is focused on tech for virtual meetings could probably help us in other departments as well. Thank you.
Thank you all. All right, so Martin has his work cut out. The next item, I'm just trying to think, why don't we just finish up the rest of the agenda? Then I want to come back, if it's okay, to number 12. So let's do our discussion and action regarding the curb cut for 1589 Hewland Street. And Rhonda, did you have some comments on this address?
I do, because we have an owner and a contractor listed. So I just want to make sure that the address is, this address that's listed on here is the house address, and the solar field, if it's the same solar field that we've been discussing for a while, it's 1595.
Mm-hmm.
So I just need to get the address straightened out, and also to make sure that BVD Solar is just the installer and not the solar owner at this point, because we've had Navison who purchased it from
Con Ed.
Right.
And so I just need to clarify that, but that shouldn't affect the curb cut because they're going to need a curb cut anyway. So it's just a matter of making sure that the address is correct.
Should we table this then, under the circumstances?
Can we approve it with just the clerical changes if Rhonda so seems fit?
I think that it's just a technicality because they split the property just recently and gave it a new address for the solar. So I think really that's probably the biggest thing. I mean, as far as the curb cut goes, it's not going to matter who the owner is, but as far as the Board of Selectmen and entering into that agreement, you're going to want that clarified.
Okay.
But on here, I don't think it's...
So our next meeting may be on Thursday. Let's just ask, Rhonda, since you deal with so much of this, would you rather the board held off until we know? No, you would rather do this subject to
Yes.
a resolution of these technical issues.
And I'm not even sure that this, like I said, needs the resolution of the contractor versus who
Right.
the owner of the field is. That's going to be for you coming up.
Mm-hmm.
But we just need to clarify the address on exactly where this is going, and I believe it's probably 1595 and
Mhm.
1589.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting here that, and we've talked about changing this form. We should have a line that says, what is the curb cut's address? Because the owner and the address has to put their own name. But if they're doing it for another piece of property, we should have the name of where the address of where the curb cut is going.
We have a location, they just chose not to fill it out.
Okay, so you're going to take care of that for us, okay? And maybe that should say location of the curb cut. Maybe it's not clear.
Well, and that is important for our fire department, to know the
Yes.
exact street address.
Yes, yes. Okay, and we have no conditions with it. It's been signed off. Does the board wish to make a motion on this?
So moved.
Second.
So we're going to approve this as presented, subject to
it.
clarification on several issues. Okay, so any further discussion? And this is a pretty good-sized field. I know we've been working with Navison on the contract for months, and we just, I think we just approved that at town meeting. Trying to remember.
Will you approve the ability for the selectmen to negotiate?
Yes, that was
The
what we
hesitation in getting it over is what they have now are preliminary numbers. And
Yes.
I'm not sure that we want to send a contract with preliminary numbers until we get the full ones, though. We just
Yes, which comes at the end. It's kind of a little bit of a chicken and an egg. All right, so all those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Okay, we're taking care of that. All right, and that was so I just want to spend a few minutes on the American Rescue Plan Act. Deb referenced it earlier in her presentation, and there's a lot of information out there, but this is the money that the Congress and the President signed into law in March. I'm not sure, I've seen two different numbers, maybe Rhonda knows this better, but the town of Sheffield will receive somewhere between $915,000 and $935,000. I'm not sure why there's a discrepancy, but they'll sort it out. There were the final, this is administered by the U.S. Department of Treasury. This is coming straight to us. You may have also read that there is money that's going to the state of Massachusetts, and right now is under the governor's control, with the legislature trying to get some of that control as to how that's spent. The American Rescue Plan Act is kind of like Charter and Spectrum. You got two names involved, but when it comes to us here in Sheffield, it's also known as the Coronavirus Local Fiscal Recovery Fund, or CLFRF. So if you see ARPA and CLFRF, it took me a long time, okay? These are basically the same thing, all right? The other thing that's interesting about this is that it is not up to the Division of Local Services to make individual determinations regarding eligibility. We've done this with FEMA and MEMA, and also the CARES Act and the CARES Act Coronavirus Relief Fund. There's so many acronyms in here. This is going to be up to the Select Board with public input as to how this money is spent. And we will have to make a report, I think it's in October of this year, and then after that we will have to make annual reports. But there's only so many ways this money can be used. It is very, very strict. I'm just going to, and I'm reading off of one of my cheat sheets. It cannot be used to replenish any rainy day fund or other reserve fund, such as pension fund. It cannot be used to basically offset tax, lower a tax rate. All right, that's what the Republican governors of many states are suing the Treasury on at this moment. So the eligible uses and the information that I've sent out to the Select Board, and you can go on, just Google the American Rescue Plan Act, and there's more information than you really probably want to look at. But there's a very long list of how you can spend money. The first one is public health spending, and in a nutshell, this includes COVID-19 mitigation efforts, medical expenses, behavioral health, and certain public health and safety staff. We don't have a hospital, we don't have some of that, but we had talked about that warm line.
Yes.
And it's basically a helpline for our regional school district, teachers and students, and that might be something there. Also, the economic impacts of the public health emergency, COVID. So these include efforts to mitigate economic harm to workers, households, small businesses, affected industries, and the public sector, which is government. So some of what Deb was talking about would probably fall into there. One of the other things, and I know Rhonda and Monique are going to be working on this when the time is right, we can use this money to basically pay ourselves back for any lost Town of Sheffield revenue. So there's a worksheet and a very specific formula, but any payments that would come out of that can be used to fund government services to the extent of revenue reductions from the pandemic. So we could use that if there are revenue losses for any government expenditure, okay? The second to the last is premium pay for essential workers. Funds may be used for additional support for those who have faced the greatest health risks because of their service in critical infrastructure sectors. And there's huge guidelines on that. The last one may hold a lot of interest to us. And the funds can be used for water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. We don't have water and we don't have sewer. Water company is a private company. But recipients may invest to improve access to expanding broadband access, as well as potentially the funding underserved and unserved households and businesses. They have very specific requirements as to what the speeds are, upload and download. And interestingly enough, as you read this, get into the details, they're actually doing more to encourage working with companies that are not the established carriers. So we're going to have to spend some more time. I know there's been concern in town, George just mentioned it, about the lack of complete coverage, the lack of speeds, and the costs involved. It's been a running commentary. Anyway, I just wanted to give a very quick overview on this. I want to also let the town know that our town administrator has signed to accept this money. You actually have to say you want it. So Rhonda has taken care of saying, yes, thank you, we do want it. And depending on the choices of what we choose with town input as to how to spend this money, we may have up to 2026 for major capital projects such as broadband. All right, there's a lot of rules in here, but this is kind of, want to let you know that your town is on this, that we are going to be looking more and more into this. This is not going to be a simple program. It's, while there's a lot less restrictions in some ways about getting approvals, there's a lot more specific instructions written into the law, and if you don't follow the law, they can come back and get the money. Fortunately, Brendan Sweeney, who has helped us for the last 15 months try to figure out CARES and MEMA and FEMA and all of those issues, is our local municipal contact, and any of us who have talked with him know that he is smart on his game and extremely helpful. So I just wanted to give a preview of that.
Thank you.
No questions, please. Okay. All right, so board items. Bob.
I would just like to thank Mass DOT for finishing the sidewalks in Ashley Falls. They look nice, it's all done. Everybody's happy.
And they also potholed, repaired 7A.
They repair 7A, all the potholes have been filled, so
Yes.
it's a much smoother ride.
Yes, good, good. And people, I think, are just going to have to learn to park on the sidewalk if they're going to perpendicular park at the post office or park parallel.
We don't want to go into that part because that made it a little bit more difficult, but that's okay.
And unfortunately, we couldn't ask them to move the sidewalk because then the cars would be out in the middle of the road. So it is what it is, but I'm hoping that people are pleased, and that was a request from certain citizens in Ashley Falls. So I think, as we all have, Mass DOT for moving on it very quickly. Anything else, Bob?
I'm all set, thank you.
Okay, well, I just want to let you know we had a wonderfully large donation from an anonymous donor for specifically battery recycling at our transfer station. So we will be working on that. I hope if I get reappointed as our recycling coordinator in the upcoming fiscal year. So we will be sending a letter to that anonymous donor, but just a wonderful contribution by a caring resident. Either next week or possibly the following week, as part of the Complete Streets grant, we will be remarking in some cases, and actually marking for the first time all of the railroad crossings where the Housatonic Railroad crosses from Ashley Falls all the way up. I think there's 22 crossings, or maybe it's 11 crossings, and it'll be on both sides. And then we'll work on whether the signs that warn you that you're coming on this are are adequate, but that was good. So that's it for me. Rhonda?
I have one item. So we had discussed at our working meeting last week an email from a young man named Austin Hunt, who's a college student from Kansas. And he would like to come and go door to door with educational materials offered for sale for anyone that he may talk to at the door to door. So there was some question on whether you would allow the soliciting permit. There is a permit that you have to do that, which is $25. And so you charge me with checking with the chief. And he is fine as long as he checks in with the chief. Chief has his number plate. He wears a identification badge. And I think that if you decide to do this, that we should send an email blast out with his name, his car, if maybe not his number plate, but at least the make and model of his car, and that he's going to be coming to possibly coming to your house.
Sounds reasonable.
Is that a motion to approve?
So,
Second.
Okay, with all of those stipulations, and I get the feeling as soon as he gets the peddler solicitor permit, he's probably going to be out. So doing that, so maybe an email blast sooner than later is going to be good. And if you're not getting the email blast, go online and sign up for them. There's a lot of useful information that comes from that. Please consider doing that. Anything else, Rhonda?
That's it.
Are there any public comments? George?
Yes, I was wondering, what's going on at the bridge over Schnaub Brook on Kelsey Road?
So the state has been out there taking a look at the bridge, and it's one of the projects that they have talked about taking on for themselves to replace. I can get you all the specifics. I don't have that in front of me tonight. I'm sorry, George, but I can bring that to the next meeting for a better explanation.
Because neither me or my son has received any word of what's going on. My other son found out that they were doing some drilling down there this past week. I happened to be out of town. And I just want to know if they're aware that that's only a one-rock road. And the other thing I was wondering, is there any way we could get some of the veteran stones reworked, like up in the Brush Hill Cemetery and Clark Cemetery? They're kind of broken and falling over, and need some TLC to put them right. They're Revolutionary War veterans, Civil War veterans.
Okay, George, I think what we're going to need, and if this would be done by the American Legion, it would be terrific. We should, if we do not know where the locations are, then we're going to have to hire someone to go find that. So if your group would consider putting together a listing of what cemetery and what stones, if you want to draw a very simple map so people can find them. If you have recommendations on someone to do the work, I know the Cemetery Commission and Jim Miller in particular has done some of this work, then potentially we could get a cost estimate. It's unfortunate that some of that wasn't included in this year's budget to take to town meeting, but we do have a special town meeting coming up later this year, so if we have that information, it might be something we can consider taking to the voters. Usually this is a multi-year project, but if we don't get started, it never gets done.
Sure.
So if you would bring that information forward, it would be greatly appreciated.
I'll do my best.
Okay, well, I know your best will be excellent. Thank you. And we'll have Rhonda find out what's going on with the bridge. Generally before, it's been my experience with Mass DOT, I don't know if they do it on small bridges. I don't know if that's a bridge or a culvert.
It's a bridge.
They usually do some sort of a public announcement and get the community involved.
Yes, normally they do that. I think this is more of kind of investigating what is needed
Yes.
And, so testing the soil and doing borings, I
Yes.
believe would probably.
So we will watch that. It would be wonderful if Mass DOT would pick that up, because then the town will not have to pay for it. And that's not going to be an inexpensive bridge, given its environmental concerns and placement, etc. So we'll get back to you on that, Roger. We'll investigate that, okay?
Just following up on bridge talk, I probably missed something. The bridge on Berkshire School Road, the sidewalk. What's going on with that?
Yes, I don't know who's got that. There's been a gap in that new concrete for months.
A long time.
I know there's one on
Big hole.
Route 7 just at the corner that I believe our equipment took out, but
This is right on a straightaway. I mean,
I know. So thank you for bringing that up.
My understanding that the water pipe burst under there.
It
And
looks
they
like
had
something
to
went
dig it
wrong.
out.
Well, if it's been dug out, then it can be, you know, and if they need to put something
All that time
else,
to put it
then
in, and now we can't
to
use
dig it
it.
out again. Yes, so thank you for bringing that forward.
Thank you. I'm going to
Okay.
run. Thank you. Good night.
All right.
Good night.
Good night.
All right, so Todd's okay? Okay, so let's have a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone. This ends our meeting tonight. Have a nice evening.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Joe.